Now, here to discuss the Jussie Smollett verdict and the ramifications of his fake hate attack is the Post Millennial's editor-at-large, Andy Ngo. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Andy, we've got to talk about this here because this is just an absolutely fascinating case, I think, to so many people here in Australia. And the question I have is, Jussie Smollett's crime was so bizarre and utterly unbelievable. Why do you think so many people fell for it? Did they just want it to be true?
Well, it's no surprise that the media establishment, the media class is always in line with what the Democratic Party's agenda and goal is. If you go back to the beginning of 2019 when Smollett's explosive allegations came out, at that time, Democrat politicians were pushing so-called anti-lynching legislation, which was just a publicity stunt because murder is already criminalized and illegal. And Smollett's history in particular, he has and had very close ties to the upper echelon of those in the Democratic Party. And all of them saw what his claims were, which blamed everything that the Democrats hated, Trump supporters, what they think Trump stands for. So it was convenient to latch on. I wasn't surprised that all these celebrities came out to weigh in because celebrities are by and large stupid. But I was disappointed to see politicians who now have come to be president and vice president respectively throw in their full support behind Smollett when from the very first that we knew of the case, it was already hard to believe.
Yeah, and I mean, Jussie Smollett is now facing both sentencing for his crime as well as potential civil suits. I mean, do you think that for all he did with this to tear apart the country racially and contribute to that element of division in the U.S., is this a fair price to pay for his blatant lies that not only wasted taxpayer money, but also, let's not forget, distracted police officers in a very violent city, Chicago, from investigating real crimes?
Yeah, so your viewers should be reminded that the prosecutor in Chicago, Kim Foxx, actually moved to not prosecute Smollett. So there was a special process that came in place to intervene because otherwise Smollett wouldn't have been prosecuted on any crimes. That's how powerful he is and his connections actually are. Even though he could be sentenced to jail time for each of these felony charges, it's not going to happen. It's Chicago, unfortunate. In America, if you are on the left, and particularly if you're politically connected, you're not going to a sentence to what you should be for crimes that you commit.
Well, I mean, I think I saw somebody had a marvelous line there. They said that if he was to go to jail, you know, the really cruel thing is that he'd be forced to share a cell with his own attacker. So there you go. But you have a magnificent tweet, and I know Twitter is often a sewer, but there are little diamonds in there that outlines the truth behind a lot of these hoaxes. And you say that I'm surprised when people are surprised that Jussie Smollett would fabricate a hate crime. People who claim to be victims of the right or whites are rewarded by American society, often financially. Some will lie. The fact that people are compensating this culture of oppression, how long has this been the status quo?
Well, Americans are a good people. So when they hear that a person has been victimized to hate, there's an outpouring of support. And unfortunately, there are those, usually on the left, who will take advantage of that kindness from Americans to claim to be a victim. And before I did reporting on Antifa, I used to write about hate crime hoaxes a lot. And there's usually not a lot of national coverage on it because it's inconvenient to the talking points of the left. But as you can see, like Smollett, or on a smaller context at a university setting, as soon as you come out and provide no evidence and make some outlandish claim, you get media attention, support from the administration, support from others. You can set up a GoFundMe, people donate money. There's so much to gain by being a victim, that people go as far as to fabricate hate hoaxes.
But I mean, I'm glad you said before that Americans are fundamentally decent people, because I think they are, and I'd have a lot of good reason to say that. But does this show the fact that this crime, this hoax crime, happened and so many other hoax crimes have occurred, Andy? Does this actually prove that America is not the racist society that some people on the left would have people believe, if people have to go out there and make up fake hate crimes because there's not enough real hate crimes for them to capitalize on?
Yes, if we believe the talking point from the establishment left that hate is so it's banality in America and it's so common, if we were to hear some of these allegations, we would shrug our shoulders and think that's life. That's how life is like every day in America. But the fact is, it's not, and it strikes at the core of for the average American when you hear something so hateful happening, and because hate crimes are actually so rare, and we have the data, you can look at how often they happen by the population size. And unfortunately, whenever there is an incident that happens or alleged to happen, there's a lot of attention. Whenever it's then reported later on that it's unsubstantiated or even faked,
Yeah.
there's usually not that media coverage.
I have a clip here from over a year ago where you talked to Dr. Phil about this exact problem. Let's have a look at that.
Why does somebody lie about a crime like this? Well, they tend to lie because they feel victimized overall. They feel like, I am generally victimized by the system, so this event that I'm reporting, while not specifically true, is emblematic of how I am generally treated by the system, so it is not a lie.
Actually, a lot of hoaxers don't even think that what they're doing is wrong.
Right.
I mean, a lot of what Sally was saying here was really about the larger narrative, the larger story about bringing attention to hate in America and the climate of hate. So as long as we still find a silver lining or justification for hoaxes, we're going to continue to incentivize it.
The problem is somebody on the other end of that hoax is held accountable and pays a price for something they didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, why is it these people who blatantly lie seem to feel as if it's the appropriate course of action?
Well, they can gain monetarily, financially. I mean, the prosecutors said that Smollett carried out his hoax because he essentially, for PR purposes, he wanted to make a bigger name for himself. So it's like a bargain for higher pay for his work on the Empire television show. But there are many people who excuse these acts or think that ultimately, while the hoaxes are bad, that they help bring attention to the climate of political hate in America, how racism is an epidemic in America, and therefore there's possibly a silver lining. We see that over and over, particularly it's actually quite unusual that the convictions will happen most of the time when these happen at a local level or on university campuses. Administrations will put out some statements saying they investigated. Unfortunately, it's untrue, and they just want to move on. And despite this particular instance being not real, there's still so much hate in this country and on our campus, and then they just move on. It's actually really rare that anybody's held accountable for what they do. And which, by the way, one of what people should pay attention to is when somebody claims to be a victim of a hate crime, is does that alleged victim go to the press and the media or social media first, or do they go to law enforcement to report the crimes?
Great points, Andy. As always, thank you so much for your time, and you can check out Andy's work at thepostmillennial.com. Andy, thanks as always, and see you soon.
My pleasure.